one of the smallest countries but with the biggest history. In this podcast, we'll explore the history of the land of Israel, its culture, its places, and the stories nobody tells you. Welcome to Israel con Mati.
The resolution of the Dutch Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstained.
I want to live to see that day of peace between you and us, of peace between all our neighbors and us.
Welcome to the first episode of Israel in 10,000 Steps. We will be talking about the land of Israel, about its history, about the culture, about the places you can find here, and many, many other things. We will discover Israel together while I do my 10,000 steps. You can find me in all the social networks as Israel con Mati. Okay, let's deep dive in the first episode. This episode is about a letter. Yes, a letter that only had 67 words, but it changed the history of this land for sure, and of the world a little bit. I am talking about the Balfour Declaration. What is the Balfour Declaration? Let's begin with the context. We are in 1917. We are in the middle of what was called the Great War, which we now call the First World War. In 1917, Arthur Balfour, the foreign minister of Great Britain, sends a letter to Lord Lionel Walter Rothschild, which is not the same Rothschild as the one from the street in Tel Aviv, but it is the same family. In this letter, Balfour said that Great Britain favored the establishment of a Jewish national home in the area that was called at that time Palestine, which was not an independent state, which had people in it, Arab Muslims, Jews, and other minorities, and that was being controlled at that time by the Ottoman Empire. This letter was sent by Arthur Balfour to Lionel Walter Rothschild, who was British and a Zionist. Before we go any further, I want to read the entire declaration so that it is clear what it said and what it didn't say. So, the letter reads, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. Now, there are a few questions that arise from reading this text. The first one is, why was Great Britain speaking about land that they didn't control yet? They were invading it at that point, but they didn't control it. It was being controlled formally by the Ottoman Empire. The second question is, what would happen to the people that already lived there? As we said, there were here Jews, there were here Arab Muslims, and there were here other minorities. And the third one is, why now? But here is where the plot thickens. This was not the first time that Great Britain was, let's say, playing with this land or favoring someone controlling this land. 2 years before the Balfour Declaration, the British spoke with Sharif Hussein bin Ali, an Arab from Mecca. They wanted to make a pact where the idea was simple. The Arabs would help the British get rid of the Ottoman Empire in this region, and in return, Great Britain would give the Arabs certain autonomy and certain independence in some regions, including Palestine. These conversations that were held between the British and the Arabs were called the McMahon-Hussein correspondence. But that was not it, because in 1916, 1 year after the McMahon-Hussein correspondence, they meaning the British, signed an agreement with the French. It was called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and it was made in secret. In the agreement, they determined different influence zones, which were going to be controlled either by the French or the British. In the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the idea was that the region of Palestine was going to be controlled by an international administration. Okay, great. So who controls the land? Who owns it? Is it the Arabs? Is it the British? Is it the French? Is it an international administration? Is it the Jews? Who was going to control the area? Because it was not very clear. In only 2 to 3 years, the British had made several, let's say, pacts or agreements with different people. Some people back then said that this was the too promised land. Okay, I want us to do a small analysis of what the letter says, but before I want to ask us a question. The question is, why now? Why did Balfour, why did Great Britain, in the middle of the First World War in 1917, send this letter to Rothschild? Turns out this was more a strategic move than an ideological thing. The British thought that the Jews in the United States of America and in Russia had much more power than they actually had. And they thought that if they favored the Zionists, if they favored the Jewish people, then these Jewish leaders in Russia and in the United States, they would make their countries continue fighting in the war with Great Britain. They grossly miscalculated the power the Jews had, and that didn't really help much. People thinking that the Jews control the world. Shocker, right? There was one more thing that helped with this decision by Great Britain. And this thing is not actually a thing, it's a person. And his name was Chaim Weizmann. Weizmann was a British chemist. He was brilliant. He was Jewish and he was a Zionist. Chaim Weizmann invented a process to produce acetone. And no, it's not for your nails. Acetone was being used for explosives. Generally speaking, Great Britain would get this acetone from Germany. But the Germans were in the world the enemy. So that became a little difficult for them. This process was of great help for Great Britain. And Chaim Weizmann decided to give the patent for the process to the British for free. In return, the British made Weizmann the director of the Royal Navy Laboratories. With that position, he had great influence and he could speak with people like Balfour or even Churchill. So this invention by Weizmann really helped move the needle towards helping the Zionists. Okay, we spoke about Balfour, we spoke about Weizmann, and now the idea is to try to analyze what was actually written in this letter. In the first place, they spoke about a Jewish national home, but they didn't mention a state. The second thing is they never spoke about specific borders, so the territory was not really that clear. Third thing, there was no deadline, no timeline, nothing like that. Then we have the little issue with mentioning the Arab Muslims as non-Jewish communities. You can imagine the Arab Muslims did not like that much. And the last thing, this was not really written there, but they were speaking about a region that they didn't really formally control yet. They were invading it, but they didn't control it yet. So that was kind of sketchy. Okay, so the letter was pretty ambiguous. It did not really say much about the specifics of it, but it was very powerful. It was the first time that a superpower was recognizing the right of the Jewish people to inhabit their ancestral homeland. Okay, that's great, that's fantastic. But this is a letter. Letters don't do much yet. What happened after the letter in 1920 was that after the First World War, the winners got together in the conference of San Remo and they decided that the Balfour Declaration was going to be accepted. They gave the British mandate in Palestine, and one of the goals of the British was to establish a Jewish homeland in the region. So what started as a letter became a policy. And then the League of Nations, which came before what we now call the UN, accepted this policy as well. Some people saw this as a reivindication, as acceptance of a right that was there way before, a right of the Jewish people to inhabit their homeland. And so people, especially the Arab Muslims of the region, felt that they were being left out in the letter by being called non-Jewish instead of Arabs or Arab Muslims or anything like that. Let's remember that this was in 1920 and the State of Israel was created in 1948. So this declaration and what happened in San Remo didn't really create the State of Israel. That happened way after, and after a very long and complicated history between the British and the inhabitants of this region. Okay, let's go with a summary of what we discussed today. In 1915, Great Britain spoke with the Arabs of the Mecca to try to make a pact where the Arabs would help them get rid of the Ottoman Empire in the region, and in exchange they would give them some autonomy in some regions, including what was called Palestine, which was not a independent state, and at that point it was being controlled by the Ottoman Empire, and the inhabitants of the region were Jews, Muslim Arabs, and other minorities. In 1916, Great Britain gets together with the French in secret, and they signed the Sykes-Picot Agreement, where there were influence areas that were divided between the British and the French. In the Sykes-Picot Agreement, Palestine would be administered internationally. Then in 1917, Arthur Balfour, the foreign minister of Great Britain, comes and sends a letter to Lionel Walter Rothschild, Zionist British, saying that Great Britain favored the establishment of a Jewish homeland in the region of Palestine. The letter was kind of vague, kind of ambiguous, but it was there. It was all there. A few years later, in 1920, the winners of the First World War get together in the San Remo Conference, and they give the British the mandate in Palestine with the goal of establishing a Jewish homeland in the region. So what was a letter became a policy, and this policy was accepted by the League of Nations, which is what came before what we now call the UN. The Balfour Declaration and what happened in San Remo didn't really create the State of Israel. That happened way after, and after lots of long and very difficult years between the British and the inhabitants of this region. But it was a very, very important document because it was the first time that a superpower was accepting and recognizing the right of the Jewish people to live in their ancestral homeland. The Zionists viewed this document favorably. They did not think that this document was giving them their right. Their right was there before the document, and the Zionists were trying to get to this land way before Balfour grabbed a pen, but of course they were happy about it. The Arab Muslims of this region felt that the letter was kind of making them invisible because they were called non-Jewish inhabitants or non-Jewish communities instead of being called Arabs, Arab Muslims, or anything like that. And I mention all of this because it's very important to understand that history is made by people and the consequences are felt by people as well. So if we don't at least try to understand the people involved in what happened through history, we're missing a very big piece. We're missing context that really make the history. That is all for today. This was the first episode of Israel in 10,000 Steps. I am Mati. You can find me in all social networks as Israel con Mati. That's Israel with Mati in Spanish, because this content will be both in Spanish and in English. So if you want to know more about history, culture, day-to-day things, places, and very curious facts that no one else will tell you, follow me, like my stuff, and thank you for being there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for questioning what you know, and just thank you for being.